I had no interest in art whatsoever as a kid. When I graduated from college, I wanted to be a writer, and so I got this job teaching sixth grade in Bloomington, over by Fontana. That was just about the time, 1949, when abstract art started to hit the Life magazine, and some of the stuff looked suspiciously like that. The thing that gave me the confidence was I saw that those kids in Bloomington who were from a very poor socioeconomic class were doing the stuff that was in Life magazine and Art News. You can believe me, it's there. I'm going to show you. Well, I've had 3 or 4 themes, and it hasn't been a development like that, but these particular themes seem to pop up from 6 months to a year and a half. And often it comes like you have a bunch of paintings that are very high key in color, very complicated, like these are called complicated. That one. And then, so the next batch of things probably would be simple and restricted in color. It's sort of like Picasso said, you paint green until you can't stand green anymore, and then you paint something else. But it's still making visual objects. When somebody says, what is it? The person is not familiar with art. It's a painting, but it's very unsatisfactory. It's a visual object. You look at it, and what does it do to you? Oh, it is. I think it is. I think if you're brought up in Chicago, in the middle of the city, it's one of the big visual impressions in your life. I always think there are a lot of paintings like that one over there. It always reminds me, or started to after a while, when I look out my bedroom window and I look across the driveway of an apartment building, there's a whole wall with a bunch of windows. A city wall somewhere. But somebody else entitled it, it's a graveyard. So. He had just got to Claremont, and it's one of the first houses he did. And we were the same age, we got to be close friends, and I didn't know anything about architecture. And my parents were going to have it. My dad was a doctor in Santa Barbara. And they had, very conservative tastes. They wanted me to have a proper American house, and I probably find it. They worried that there was no wall in the back. But then after a while, they got to understand too. They built a house just like this up in Santa Barbara, around a big old 200-year-old oak tree, which was in the middle of it. There was right after the war, but that happened in a lot of places after the war. Now, I was a member of that generation. Those were the greatest years, those post early 50s, late 40s, because they're the most older, more serious, more turned on, no matter the subject matter. And that happened in art, and it happened here in art. And that's why I came to Claremont from Redlands. Well, there was Paul Darrow, who was here for a long time. He's in Laguna now. Doug McClellan was here. Jack Zajac was here. Sue Hertel was she was a really good long-time artist. Bob Frame, Arnie Schiffer. And there were really a number of guys that had art careers. Harry and McIntosh and Rupert Deesford. They had a little cabin on Foothill in front of the bank. Hard Edge got started in the late 50s. And I hate that word. It doesn't mean anything. What's a soft edge? Like, Rothko or Monet. But the critics, to write about something, you have to find a word. So, unfortunately, I didn't think that was a very good word. Abstract classicism was another one. We had a show in London, and an internationally important critic called it abstract classicism. Well, it was good for your career because you got a name now. But it didn't mean anything unless you take it in context where you got, in any art, it's the romantic and the classical sort of. It's all kind of torn between those two poles. And so there was abstract expressionism, which was accepted for the wild painters, which were brand new then. The abstract classicism as opposed to expressionism. But it doesn't balance out equally. They tried. Well, it depended on who I was talking to, what term would they would understand. I was just supposed to, I'm a contemporary artist, and I'm not a non-objective painter because I'm sure these objects are they're objects, and they're not abstract. That's the quote. I just call myself a contemporary painter. It's hard to believe, but if I were to pick out one show, I get the biggest kick on this one right now because I've been here that whole time, 55 years later, and I'm still about 2 blocks away. And the thing is about that show, thanks to David Bagel, and the show got started by my going to see David, and say, I've had these 8 paintings that I did 30 years ago, and I've never seen them. So I said, let me have one of the galleries, and we'll put up those 8 paintings. And just because I felt that they were one piece. I never could get any dealers to put them up because I insisted they get sold as one, and they'd say, who's going to buy 8 dark, simple paintings? So he said, oh, fine. But he said, why don't you take the other one and do something opposite? So here, that's kind of my two poles, the real simple kind of stuff and the real complicated kind of stuff. One more thing with those kids, who you'd ask the question before about how art related to people. After they were past the mountains and truck stages, I could give them assignments, and they could all do it their own way. Yeah, I could pass out paper and say, fill your paper with a rainbow. And what's the rainbow in your mind? You think of yellow, green. You get purples, green. You get browns and grays. Of course, you get a regular, honest to God, what we think of as a rainbow. But I mean, it just showed me the different innate. They're showing they're happy with their rainbow. There's no conflict in their mind with it about that. That was a lot of lessons with that.